Okay. May I give this to you, please? Hello. What is that?
This will the pointer on top. Okay?
I see.
When you do this,
Hello everyone. A very warm welcome to the third session for today, towards a new paradigm for urban planning in India, plan for redevelopment of Mumbai Port. I'll just take a couple of minutes to introduce the speaker and both the discussants for this session. Dr. Bimal Patel is an architect, urbanist and academic who has traversed disciplinary, professional and institutional boundaries to explore the ways in which architecture, urban design and urban planning can enrich the lives of people in Indian cities. He heads HCP as its chairman and managing director. Since 2012, he has been heading CEPT University as president. He received a diploma in architecture from CEPT Ahmedabad in 1984, a master's in architecture and a master's in city planning in 1988, and a PhD in city and regional planning in 1995 from the University of California, Berkeley. In 1996, he founded Environmental Planning Collaborative, a not-for-profit consultancy and policy research and advocacy organization. His work has won numerous awards, including the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Urban Planning and Design, and the Padma Shri. With that, I would now like to introduce both the discussants. So, Vidyadhar Phatak is an urbanist of 54 years of experience. Out of these, 37 years were spent in public service in Mumbai with BMRPB, CITCO and MMRDA, and 12 years in consulting in various states and cities in India. He was a member of the Planning Commission Task Force on Urban Development and a member of the National Commission on Urbanization. He also served as a part-time director of the National Housing Bank. His consulting assignments involved work in Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Punjab, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Agartala, and Dhaka. During 2016 to 2019, he was Dean of Faculty of Planning at CEPT University. And the second discussant that we have for the session, Nitin Kilawala, graduated in 1974 from Mumbai and gained professional experience from the then MP Mr. Pilu Modi before he started his practice and subsequently formed Group 7 Architects and Planners Private Limited. He has designed projects ranging from all typologies of buildings and interiors. He has also won several architectural awards and recognition. He has been guest faculty and jury across many architectural institutes pan-India. He is the past president of Institute of Indian Interior Designers. He believes that the benefits of good design should percolate down to the masses. So we have a similar structure for this session where the speaker will first share their presentation, followed by a discussion. We'll take questions in the end towards the conclusion of the session. Over to you.
I'm going to sit down, please. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Watson, for organizing this for us. Let me get on with the presentation straight away. As I said, what I'm going to do is present the plan for redevelopment of Mumbai Port. I'm hoping to talk about a few other things that suggest a different way of thinking about urban planning. So before I start, I'd like to state one thing. The work that I'm going to present started in 2016. Number of people have worked on it at HCP and from outside. And I want to acknowledge that it's collaborative work. I have the privilege of presenting it and sharing it with you, and have the privilege of leading that team, but a lot of people worked. And you will see here that amongst the specialist consultants, also our discussant for today, Professor Fatak, who was involved in it, in some portions of it. So the presentation is going to have 3 parts. First, I'm going to talk about the opportunity for Mumbai, the vision very quickly, just a sort of a visual of what is being done, and then what are the features of this plan that I think are special and innovative. Let's start with the opportunity. Mumbai and Mumbai Port. Now, all of us know Mumbai quite well. Large metropolis around Thane Creek here, Arabian Sea. You can see this distance from here to here is almost 40 kilometers, from here to here 30 kilometers. Vast metropolis, very important city of India. And here you are, another view of the same city. That's the terrain on which Arabian Sea here, this little island city sticking out here, Thane Creek out here. Most of our talk is going to be about this part of Mumbai, which is the island city. That's what I'm going to talk about most. You can see right across, it's about 15 kilometers in length and across about 5 to 7 kilometers in width. So let's zoom in to this area here. We all know that this was not really all land. Okay. It was a set of islands like that from Colaba here, which is at this point, at one point in the early 16th, 17th century, it was all islands, to Mahim out here, 7 islands there. So here you have how the city evolved, and I'm going to talk about how the city evolved along with the port, because the two were really tied up for a long period of time. Here you can see in outline form the island city of Mumbai at this place here. Sorry, I'm losing this signal on this, and I can't point with this. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So here the outline is of the island city, and you can see what the landmass was, and this is in 1670. This is what the landmass was. Most of Mumbai didn't even exist at that time. It was a set of islands like this, and gifted by the Portuguese to King Charles of England, 1662. The British were a seafaring nation. They understood that this would work marvelously as a port. Okay. And here you have an image from 1668 of Bombay Fort and Harbour, a small trading town, outpost, let us say, of the British Empire that was slowly growing. That's in 1812. You can see that a large portion of the land has been reclaimed. All of these islands have been, and the port was located somewhere here at that time. The real boost to the trade of Mumbai came during the 19th century, with cotton becoming very important, and during the American Civil War, the trade really expanded. So Mumbai Port really took off at that time, and Mumbai city expanded. Lots of cotton was being exported from here. And this also spurred the development of the railway, because the cotton had to be brought from central India to the port and out. So now this island city got a railway. It had a great connection. There was a great thing, and the port started developing very well. So here you have in 1864 the first railway line coming down here and bringing goods to the port from interior of India. The Mumbai Port Trust was established in 1873, which soon became an extremely important institution for Mumbai. Here you can see in the 1930s, by this time the city was a modern city, and this is Alexandra Dock here in 1930. This is another wonderful image, I like it. This port was not just trading goods, but people were going in and out of here. And this is 1930s. My grandfather must have been 30-year-old at that time, and there were people going to East Africa and various other parts going back and forth from here. That's a lovely picture. So it was a bustling port, and really the port led the growth of the city. It was intimately tied. The city and the port was growing together, and it was a fantastic industrial sort of outpost. Here's a very nice image that talks about how the port developed, and you can see here that in the island city the port was along, let me go back here, the port was along this edge of Mumbai, but all of this was not developed. The port, as it started growing, they also started reclaiming land and building more. You can see all of this portion was still not land at that time. They were reclaiming it and building the port here. And what we see here is a set of milestones here. So you have Sassoon Dock here, you have Alexandra Dock, one of the earliest ones here. In 1908, all of this land was reclaimed. The present profile of the port slowly got created over a period of time. It was not something natural, it was completely man-made. It was not something that was always existing there. Slowly, as the port grew, they kept growing this. And here you have in 1933, what we know as Mumbai today was more or less formed, and that was the image there. Then something important happened for the port itself. Shipping trade changed, and containerization became the main way of running shipping. So you had these vast big ships coming in. Mumbai port was not equipped to deal with them, and in any case, if you brought containers to Mumbai port, the city had grown and it had choked Mumbai port. So Mumbai port now became not workable for Mumbai or for shipping activity, and soon enough the government decided that JNPT, this would be the new port, Nhava Sheva would be the new port, and you can see here the numbers, that soon the port activity, amount of material coming to Mumbai port was dropping from 6 lakh TEU to 0.5 lakh TEU, a real precipitous drop in its business, while Nhava Sheva was increasing from 5 lakh to 42 lakhs, and these are numbers from 2009 and 10. So Nhava Sheva was growing and Mumbai Port Trust was falling down. So this is nothing unique about Mumbai. Every port in the world this has happened, which is in the city. New York port went down, Amsterdam went down, Rotterdam went down, and they had to build new facilities elsewhere so that the container shipping could happen out here. So that's in 2007. Here you have all of Mumbai Island City, and here you have the port, but the port is not really usable now any longer. So if you look at Mumbai port today, it is this large stretch of land all along eastern seafront of Mumbai, and 10 square kilometers of land here. And by the way, for those of you who haven't already guessed, that's Marine Drive here. So in the heart of Mumbai, you have 10 square kilometers
of underutilized assets. So in the island city, and I say that's the island city, Mumbai is much larger than this, which is about 70 square kilometers. Almost 10 square kilometers is the Mumbai port, vast amount of land. And some shipping activity certainly continues out here. So the international cruise terminal operates out of here. Some goods and services come here from here. So some shipping certainly continues. But vast tracts of land are completely open, okay, out of this 10 square kilometers. Many of the old structures are derelict. The land can be put to much better use. This used to be a big industrial port and now is no longer. So there are large scrap yards of this sort, this land that is just underutilized. Many of the old go downs are being encroached upon. There are squatters there, etc. Many of the ports are really languishing. There's lots of pollution. This is not really a viable activity. There's lots of problems in this whole area. And this, most Mumbai people know this area because of a flyover has been built, an expressway has been built along the port. This was the only open land. So they built an expressway right here. It was easy to build one. So most Mumbai people experience this land from this expressway, which is they don't really experience. You can see a little here, you can see this little point. So that's the eastern edge, and you can see vast amount of, it's a beautiful waterfront. We all know the waterfront on the western side. We know nothing about the eastern side because that's all cordoned off inside a port. So it's a piece of land. It's 10 square kilometers in Mumbai that needs to be reconfigured, so considerable portion of it can be put to better use. So that's the real opportunity. What makes this opportunity truly exciting in some ways is that this trust land is also going to be extremely well connected. Now you can see here all the new transportation proposals that have been done. Here's the Trans-Harbour Sea Link, which is being built, and that's going to be the new Mumbai airport. So new Mumbai airport is going to be connected to this land. You can see a metro line that is going to collect all of Mumbai here and come all the way down here. You have a rail line that connects all of this part of Mumbai. So it's extremely well connected by mass transport, and you have underutilized. This is the potential magnifies because you have. And this is not just a dream. The Trans-Harbour Link is being built. So it's not as if we are talking about somewhere long into the future. Soon this land is going to be available. So this is a terrific opportunity to do 2 or 3 things. One is, this land, when I say monetize land, just put it to better use. You say monetize, put it to better use. So it's extremely valuable land, and it belongs to the shipping, so central government. You know, it's inefficiently used asset, underutilized asset. If it is put to some other use, that money would come to the Indian exchequer. That's the opportunity. Of course, Mumbai has many problems, including the shortage of space. Therefore, also potentially help Mumbai grow and its economy get more of a boost. But to us as urban designers, urban planners, this was also an opportunity to demonstrate a new paradigm for urban planning and urban design. And that's what my talk is really about. The money is exciting, and the monetization is exciting. So our job was to figure out how some of this land could be put to better use, and we had to make a plan for this area. So we started in 2015, and we had to figure out what do you do with these 10 square kilometers. We started working at that time. So what was the vision? Let me just give you just an overview of what is proposed there. So as I told you, first of all, legally speaking, the Mumbai Port Trust was made a special was designated as a special planning authority. So a separate and a special plan would be made for this area. And that was for this whole 10 square kilometers of land. So special planning authority with a jurisdiction of 10 square kilometers. This plan is not a plan part of Mumbai. It's a separate plan, but it has to be approved by the government of Maharashtra. Might be central government land. The plan has to be approved by Maharashtra government. I'm going to turn this round and show you, now we are zooming in further, the area that we are concerned with. And just to get a sense of it, that's Marine Drive here. That's Nariman Point here. That's that's Asoon Dock here. Yeah? And here, from this end to this end is 11 kilometers long. So those of you who are from Ahmedabad, is as long as the riverfront of Ahmedabad. 11 kilometers of front. This is 10 square kilometers of land. Right? At this point, it is about 2 or 3. Now, you will note this piece of extension into the sea here. So here is a plan to further reclaim such area. I'm not going to talk about it because it's not really part of the plan that we had made. When it is done, it will be reclaimed for a park, not for any other development. So that's in 10 square kilometers includes that, but I'm not going to talk about that. All the plans I show you are going to be without that area. It's just so that the numbers and the arithmetic adds up. Because that really skews the numbers if I were to include that here. So that's the plan that we have made. You can see that all the colored area from this end to this end, the plan we have made. We didn't have to make a plan for this area. It's a separate plan and done separately. In this area, it was determined that the shipping activity of one sort or the other, or port allied activities, will continue in all the blank areas. This area here, this here, and this here, no change. But there would be a redevelopment site. 1, 2, 3, 4 would be redevelopment sites. Okay, so these are redevelopment sites that were master plan proposed. That this is no longer needed for port. This can be the international cruise terminal. This can have the Ro-Ro ferry. This can have lots of shipping activity can continue. All the shipping work that is, so Mumbai Port Trust would continue its shipping activity, much smaller area. The rest is ripe for redevelopment. And today what I'm going to focus on is what we have produced a detailed master plan for. And that's this area here, which is redevelopment site 1. It's about 3.77 square kilometers. It's a hell of a lot of land. It's worth a lot. You can do a quick calculation in lakhs of crores type of land. Okay, so it's not a small amount here. So that's what we are going to talk about today. I'm narrowing down from coming area. That's 377. One more. So that little bit is what I'm going to talk about. Zoom in further. That's our plan for it. You can see here that there's parks here, the buildings, etc. You will see more of it as we go along. Even within this area, this much area is going to continue being for some port activity. Okay? So 1.24 even within this. So the new urban district that is being created here in this is actually only 2.53 square kilometers. I've zoomed in, it's 10 square kilometers of land. Really the redevelopment area is only 2.5 square. That's where. And that's the site. And let me just give you a sort of a glitzy view of this. Should I press again? so that's sort of a glitzy view of the new urban districts that is proposed, the 2.53 square kilometer new urban district that is proposed. Now, let me try and explain the plan to you and what underpins this vision. I think there is some important things here. I'm going to talk about, when I talk numbers, I'm going to talk about 253. Just keep that in mind. Because I'm going to talk about some numbers that appear startling. It's always about 253, not about 10 square kilometers. It's not about 377, 250. When I present any statistic, it's about that area. Then you will see there's no fudging here. It's just trying to keep things simple. So the first, I think, important feature of this plan is that it's, relatively speaking, by Indian planning standards, it's a bare bones plan. Actually, not much more than a street. And at the heart of this plan is a street network. That's really what it is. And the point I'm going to try and make is that that's the most important thing about any plan that we could make in a growing city. And that's what, specifying too much more than that has been the problem of Indian planning. That's what I'm going to talk about. So at the heart of this, I said, if you look at this 377 area, basically what we have taken a lot of effort in doing to make this street grid, to design it properly and design it well. Now you might ask, it's 100, you can see it's a dense grid. It's 100 meters by 100 meter squares that you can see out here, and some of them are 100 by 200s. The blocks and streets. This is what we wanted to get right. And get right in what way? Well, we looked at the existing city. It's not an empty piece of land by any means. There's already old structures here. There's that expressway which I talked about is going right through the middle. There are old warehouses. There are old streets here with old trees here. We paid a lot of attention to that, and we drew up all the existing streets in this area and decided to base our grid on these streets, existing streets. And eventually, out of that grid, all these sort of colored ones, what color shall we call it? It's the common color or whatever, is called existing streets. Little widened, but those alignments remain. So we are building streets on top of streets. There's a reason for that. I'll get to that. We also made the street grid in such a way that it could eventually align with the streets in the adjacent area. So that also had to be made so that the east-west connectivity could be improved. When the port was built, actually, there was a railway line going through here, and the port was a cordoned off area. So it has very poor east-west connectivity, and over a period of time, if this is going to be a new urban district, we want that urban district to be well connected with the rest of Mumbai, so we aligned it with the rest of this. You can see here we use 38% of the land in streets. That's a lot of land, and we'll talk more about this as we go further. So that was a lot, almost 40% of the land we said we are going to turn into streets. Of course, the street network was thought out, the functional hierarchy was thought out, that some of these are arterials, some are minor arterials, some are major streets, local streets, etc. The normal stuff that we do from a transportation point. Having done this street plan, our street plan was pretty much like the early plans for New York and Barcelona. Many of you might be familiar with these, but those early plans of New York and Barcelona did not specify much more than a street network. They didn't go into all sorts of details about what would be located where, what zone, what land use will be allowed, what will not be allowed, where will the amenities be, etc. All of that was not talked about much. In fact, New York looks like this, as you all know. It used to be a scraggly island. This is Manhattan Island. And this little tip used to have the town of New York. They must have been really ambitious planners because they decided in 1782 that eventually New York will have a grid of streets like this. Just think of the audacity of it, but I mean that always astounds me. And it was not just this, they kept going like this further. Then as the city grew, they kept building the streets. They didn't build it all at one go. At that time, there were no slogans saying we are going to get world-class infrastructure straight away. And as the city grew, they were building the infrastructure. And the streets were also, they were flattening the land, they were building the streets. This is in 1875, you can see this is Manhattan, Madison Avenue. They were still building streets and the buildings were coming up, and as the pressure increased, they kept building. This is a lovely set of pictures that Nikki Shah, who worked in detail with me on this, he found. That's New York, Times Square. First they built low buildings, then they built tall buildings. When the pressure went up, they built more and more and more. And here you have the same Times Square in 1908. It's actually quite a, you can see here horse carriages, right? There's almost no more, or some motor cars and horse carriages. You have Times Square building, mainly horse carriages here. Here you can see it is turned into cars. Many large buildings have come up here. And now today, a lot of it is pedestrian. There are still some cars. And why could they make it pedestrian? Because they have now mass transit. So below the streets, they built mass transit. Above the streets, they used it. The streets keep getting changed and buildings keep. The point being to say that cities are never built at one go. They keep evolving. They keep growing. And Indian planning needs to learn that we have to plan for evolution, not for a static vision of cities. So a plan like this, pretty straightforward plan, became a city like. That plan evolved a bit, but it was no more than a street. And of course, then you need more details, but that was the bare bones thing. So New York City, which was in 1876 like this, became like this, it became like this, and it became like this. Sort of growing in height, lots of new infrastructure is being added to go along. So here's New York. If I haven't convinced you, here's New York. At one time, it used to have a harbor here. All the ships used to come up here. Then, like Bombay, it lost its harbor. It lost its shipping trade to containerization. Okay? And then they turned all that land into new development. And here you have the World Trade Center, and here you have New York today again, the World Trade Center. So it's evolving, growing, changing. And at the heart of it is a street network that is holding it all together. Barcelona is another plan that was not much more than a grid of streets. And here you have this fortified town in 1714, all farmland all around it. At some stage, they decided that the city needs to grow. They didn't say that their cities don't need to grow, like many other countries in the world. And at one point, they decided to break down their fort wall, like Ahmedabad did. And they said, we are going to make a grid of streets outside to accommodate the growth. And this farmland was there. We are going to grow. And here you have, and they built a plan. So that's the grid of streets, 9 times the size of what they had. They were audacious, ambitious planners, all of them, right? And here you have the fort town. The fort walls have gone. I'll go back once more, and you see here, and they have this grid of streets. And it's a famous grid of streets. All urban designers, urban planners know about it. And it's become a city like this at this point of time. So it's a magnificent sort of a development on a very, very basic down-to-earth plan. So what our proposal is that a robust street network in the MbPT plan will hold together incremental, uncoordinated developments over a long period of time. You saw those New York pictures? That's what I mean. A building gets built here, another one here, a park comes up, and all of these things happen in an uncoordinated fashion. All cities grow like that. Nobody rolls it out like a carpet. Okay? It grows in messy, incremental, uncoordinated ways, but what holds it together is the street network. So you can speculate, and we speculated, and we said, yeah, it's like this today, then some bit will get built here. Even the streets won't get built straight away, but the plan remains in place. If it remains in place, 10 years later, maybe itna banega. Now this 10 you can make into 7, or you can make into 15, I don't care, but it's going to be incremental, that I know. Nobody can speculate about the future. So if you say, I'm going to roll it out in next 5 years, well, you're just kidding yourself. And here you are, 15 years later, and later, and later, all these buildings come up. And eventually it will all hold together as a city, and some buildings will be broken and new ones will be built, etc. Traditional Indian plans, I said, are highly specific about a lot of things that they don't need to be specific about, and they have no reason to be specific about. Traditional planning, sometimes even what gets taught at CEPT, mind you, is, they'll say, okay, take this area, make a population projection. Once the population projection is made, get the government issued standards book. Now find out how many HIG, MIG, LIG people will be there, provide for their housing, then tell me how many schools they will need, how many hospitals they will need, how many parks they will need, all government issued specifications. We used to do it like this in Russia also. And then now they draw up a plan where they say, here will be housing, here will be this, here will be industry, here will be commercial, here will be that, etc. Then they say, here will be the park, here will be the... Now, who can know the future? You can't know it for two reasons. You just think back 20 years. Some of you are not, some of you are 20, yeah, a lot of you are 20. But if you think back 20 years, Phatak Sahib, you remember, and Nitin, you certainly remember, if you go back 20 years, how much of today we could have predicted? I mean, who in their wildest imagination thought that there would be some car industry in Ahmedabad, or that you would have mobile phones, or that you would have technology is changing, with that economies are changing, and as economies change, cities will change. But more importantly, Indians are becoming richer, they are affording more and more. It's impossible to predict, and to use static government standards to predict and plan according to that is tragic, because what it does, we make very detailed zoning proposals and specify what should be located where, how it should be located, etc. And we make plans that look like this. This master plan for Delhi 2021, if you look at that list there, it's, what heavy industry, light industry, that, this, Tikna, Falana, everything is marked up there. It looks like a lovely little mosaic there, but nothing is going to happen like this. Here you have a plan for Chandigarh 2031, and they'll say this is yellow is residential. They love these colors. Huh? Yellow is residential, red is this, and then they mark it out and say, I've thought it out. It's a plan that is future proof. Everything has been thought out. We are going to have climate change. We are going to have this. We are going to have that. Everything is thought out as if you can. That's my problem. Okay? Now, very specific proposals for social amenities. Here, look at this fellow who has made this plan at some point and said, telephone exchange idhar rahega. I mean, what telephone exchange? Yeah? Those things are gone. And they say high school and playground here. Now, when land values rise, things will change. Okay, you will do municipal hospital. Municipal hospital might not be there. Why do we provide for these things when we don't know? The tragedy is that when the future decides to be different from what the planner imagined, that plan becomes a stranglehold for the city. And people are forced to follow a plan that does not make sense. Okay, what do? Here's this place where open space, primary school, all these reservations were provided in the best tradition of Indian planning in this area. I think this is in Pune somewhere. So then people decide to disregard the plan. And what happened here is this plan became that. They just decide to build. And then we blame the people for it, for being not following rules. But the rules don't make sense. So actually, Indian planning ought to make more sparser, more, bare bones plans is what I try to say. Must accept that future cannot be predicted, and we must not make specific plans that will later strangle cities. That's an important lesson. Now the second point here, feature of the plan. So we've tried to make as bare bones a plan as possible. Okay? We had to meet certain Indian planning criteria, but we've tried to be very, very cautious in that. This plan, I'd like to say, makes a very sensible use of land. Okay? Now we were very clear, right from the beginning, that this plan is going to generate the same sort of discussions that came up during the Mumbai mill lands issue, right? It's completely similar case. You had mills in Mumbai belonging to the, mill owners and the mills. The mills didn't make sense to run the mills in the middle of the city. The mills were not viable. The mills went away. This land had to be repurposed. So we have a port. Port doesn't make sense to be here. Now it has to be repurposed. Okay? At that time, when the mill lands were to be repurposed, the city of Mumbai said, what's in it for us? What's in it for us? See, this might be land belonging to mill owners, but what's in it for the city? And it's a fairly legitimate question. I have no problems with that question. Okay? And there was a fight royal between the citizens of Mumbai and many people in Mumbai and the mill owners. Some of them, many of them were also professionals, and they demanded that the land be divvied up. Now, I don't remember the exact proposals of many people from Mumbai, but the land use be divvied up so that a portion of the land can go to the mill owner, but the rest of it is used for public purposes. Okay, so it has to have something else. And it was seen as a zero-sum game. If the city won, the mill owners would have to lose. And if the mill owners won, the city would have to lose. This is how the battle lines were set. And that is how the problem was thought about. And I was clear from the beginning that, of course, our case is exactly like that issue. But we must use design to convert this zero-sum game into a win-win game. There is no reason for one to win at the expense of the other. Okay? It is possible, actually, for both people to win. And as designers, we must be looking at such difficult, complicated problems, but we should be using our design skills to turn zero-sum games into win-win games. So that's what I'd like to propose is something that we have done. How have we done it? Let me just try and explain that. So I said we have made very sensible use of the land. Now, first question I must ask is, how should one measure land use? When you ask a traditional planner, they'll say so much for residential, so much for industrial, so much for commercial, 20% for streets, 30% for residential, 30% for whatever, something for, etc. That's your normal language of land use. I'd propose that that's a very misleading way to think about land use. And I'd like to say that we would like to propose a different way of categorizing land use. Okay? A method that we developed long before this project was done. In 2006 already we had developed this method, but when somebody asks me, how is land used in the city? I say, divide it into three categories. From an urban design point of view, from an urbanism point of view, these three categories make sense. The first category, how much land is in streets and parks. This is what constitutes the public domain. Okay? And all of you will agree that the more generous the public domain, the better the city. So we should try and maximize that land use. Okay, so public domain, let's try and maximize. Okay, that's one. The second category of land use should be how much land is covered by buildings. Literally, I mean the footprint of buildings. How much land is covered by buildings. And that category is very important also, because it tells you how much ground floor space you're going to have. So the, ground floor space is always valued more, and therefore the price of land, ground floor space is always higher. Rest of the floors can be whatever, but ground floor is always costing more. City wants more ground floor space. That is why it pays more for it. Okay. Anything that city wants, you should try and maximize. Parks and gardens, streets, maximize. This, maximize. Anything city wants, try and maximize it if you can. Because if human beings want it, what more reason do you need? Okay, at least in, if it's not illegal. So the space under building footprints should be maximized. The third category of land use you must check is how much land is utilized, is inside private compounds, but is statutorily not usable. By statutorily not usable, I mean, you have most cities you look at, anybody will try to make maximum coverage possible. They will try to make that. The remaining they are not able to use because the planning bylaws have said that you have to leave a setback, you have to leave some open space, you have to do this, that, and the other. So lots of land gets used up. They legally cannot use it. Otherwise, they would have used it. In a city where land is scarce, everything that's allowed will be used, is the assumption we made. So this you should try and minimize. It's not useful for anybody else, and I'll explain that for a minute. So we did this study of Ahmedabad. Some of you might be familiar with it. That's the river in Ahmedabad, and we took these squares 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and they are 500 meters by 500 meter squares, and that's what they look like. If you go inside here, that's what that square looks like, 500 meters by 500 meters. By the way, this was the study that we did first. Why do Indian planners not think of land in this way? Because traditionally, it was impossible to measure land in this way. Okay? To measure what is below footprint, you need maps showing every building. How can you do that? You never could have done that before satellite pictures. And indeed, we developed this technique only after satellite pictures started getting available. And after we had every building measured around the riverfront, so that became a case study. And now anybody can do this exercise for any part of the country. So here you can see the public realm, streets and parks in this area, it's in the middle of Ahmedabad, is 17.2%. Building footprint is 25.6%. And a magnificent 57% is all this land that gets left out all around. That makes it 100%. All that red land, I'd like to claim, is suboptimal use of land. Why do I say that? Because of the bylaws, these are often small slivers of land, and they are very poorly shaped. Okay, so you take any typical aerial picture, you will see, by and large, you will see that it looks like this. This is all the open space around. Just a rough study here, and they look like little slivers of land like this. Nobody can use them well. It's not the most efficient way. As a designer of buildings, you will know that, my God, if this could be done a little better, this land like this, in the middle of the city, you have land like this, you have land like this, it becomes wasted land. You can't even have a park, and vast amounts get used up in these sort of slivers. We took Mumbai like this, and we studied Mumbai, and we found in Nariman Point here. Now, numbers might be a little bit inaccurate because, they are all from satellite pictures. You have public realm 24%, building footprints 22%, and 53% in all this land around. Complete sheer waste. Now, what it does is not only uses land poorly, but if a pedestrian wanted to walk from this side to this side or from this side to the back, they'd have to walk all the way around. You get large blocks. If you had a street through the middle, it would be much better. So this is vast amount of wastage. Now we look at cities that we admire, and places like London. Everybody loves to go there for holidays and walk around and talks about the cities. You have public realm is 30%, okay, which is comparatively high. And this is sensitive to where you take this square. I agree with you. But won't vary too much. Building footprint is 65% and only 5% in private open space. All of that red. Minimize the amount of suboptimally used land. You have San Francisco, you have 36% in vast streets, 36% in the public realm, 61% in footprints, and 3.4% in not utilized. There's a paper we have done. It's available online. You can take a look at that. Emergence of suboptimal land utilization patterns in Indian cities. Very sort of wordy title, but essentially that's what it says. Here's the summary of it. That by and large, Indian cities put 20-25% of land in public realm, 20-25% in building footprints, and 50 to 60% in private open spaces. And if you take Amsterdam, Hong Kong, Prague, Paris, London, Barcelona, and all the cities that we admire, you will have a proportion where 10% is in suboptimally used land, 50% in building footprints, 35% in. So that was our opportunity here. Okay. And MbPT plan makes very sensible use of land. What we have done, now some arithmetic, and that is why those numbers were important. That's the island city, 70 square kilometers. That's the port of Mumbai. That's 10 square kilometers. The remaining island city is 60 kilometers. That was our case. That is what we were testing our theory against. And I'm going to talk about only this area here. I'm not going to talk about the whole port. And that area is only 2.5 square kilometers. So the statistics I give you is about that. Okay? It improves if we include the white pockets inside that. Streets, if you take the island city of Mumbai, about 17% of land is in streets. What we've got is 38%. Our streets network is bound to be better. It's twice the amount of land. Streets are public space. Transportation is bound to be better, etc. Parks and open spaces, island city has 9%. We have 32% in parks and open spaces. Building footprints. In fact, we have less building footprints. It needn't be like this, but it's less. And it gets skewed because of the amount of land we have put in parks. Okay? 22%. 27% in the island city. And unutilized space, where did all these extra number come from? Unutilized in our case goes down. Island city wastes, in our view, we can say suboptimally used, not waste, suboptimally used is 40 people. We have brought that number down. So you look at these numbers here, you can see 60 square kilometers, we are comparing this with that, 60 with 2.5. There's no reason why this cannot be even larger number. But streets, 17%, 38, public open spaces, 9, 32, 27 building footprint, 22, private open space, this all adds up to 100. If you look at the public domain, Mumbai has 26%, we are putting 70% in the public domain. This is how you, I'd argue that this is how you convert a zero-sum game into a win-win game. You say, listen, I'm going to put that much into the public domain. And yet, in the 22%, I'm going to let the landowner realize as much value as he would have done if he had used the land along with the wastage. That's what I come to next. If I were to draw squares of the sort that I had drawn earlier, and I compare just 25 hectare area, you know, compare, this is the pattern in Lower Parel, Mumbai. This is Nariman Point. Here you have streets 12%, 21%, 39%. Public open spaces, 5% here. It's sensitive to where you take the square, I will concede that. But generally making the point here that building footprints, you have lower, here private open spaces, that's where the number has gone down. And in our case, the private open spaces are also well shaped like this. Anyway, that's next. So we must ensure, Indian planning somehow must ensure that we don't waste a crucial resource, which is land. That's the only thing you can't get more of. Infrastructure, you can get as much as you want. Over time, as you become wealthier, you can get more infrastructure. But land you will not get more of. So that you must utilize very efficiently. Second, we have a liberal attitude to floor space. Okay? Now, what do I mean by this? There are two things I mean, but let's go for it like this. We know that Indian cities are characterized by very low gross FARs. I'm not talking about builders talk about, which is mere plot ka FSI kitna hai. I'm talking about is area mein kitna floor space allowed hai. That's what I'm talking about. Okay? You take those same squares, we find that in any part of Indian city, the gross FAR across this whole area, including streets and like 1.5, 2 is maximum you will get to. You won't get further than that. And that's because everywhere planning rules require you to make low FARs. What are they worried about? Well, they're worried that we don't have enough streets. Why don't we have enough streets? Well, because we use our land poorly. We are saying we have enough streets, so you can put in. If you take Mumbai, same story, low FARs in most places. It's expanding in some places, but low FARs generally. If you take cities like London, Paris, Barcelona, they're not necessarily high-rise cities, but they still have high FARs, amount of floor space. Floor space is another thing that people want. As soon as you become richer, where you buy nice clothes, you buy nice chocolates, you take holidays, and you consume more space. Anything that people want that is not illegal or harming somebody else, you ought to give more of. But we try to restrict. So why do we have such an illiberal attitude towards expansion of floor space? You could do a PhD topic on this, why this has come about, a PhD on this. But I'd like to suggest very briefly one or two things. You see, we tend to mix up floor space and people. You see, we say we give more floors. First of all, we say that if we have more floor space, then we will stress the infrastructure. Okay? But floor space doesn't stress infrastructure. It's the people in the floor space that stress. So what they assume is that as soon as you make more floor space, it will immediately get occupied by people. But why is there why if you increase the FAR in one part of the city, why would it suddenly get congested by people? Well, because there's a general scarcity. How has the general scarcity come about? Because you have a belief that floor space causes congestion. It's an involved topic, but the fact is it's true. We did many studies to say how much floor space will be allowed here. And we tried out a modeling exercise and we says 1.3 FAR, what will you get? FAR, when I don't mean plot wise, okay? I mean the area as a whole. Then we made models of it. We tried out 2, we tried out 3. And what we decided eventually was to say that since in the rest of Mumbai, the FAR was generally speaking around 2, we would keep 2 here, even though our infrastructure and etc. was very high. So we decided on a very conservative gross FAR of 2. But now this was distributed over 22% of the land, remember. So individual buildings would have very high FARs. This is an urban design set of people, so I don't need to explain that. Once you have a robust street network, in future somebody will add more infrastructure and add more buildings. You saw Times Square, how as infrastructure comes up, buildings get broken down, new buildings come up. That's the story of cities. You can't afford to think in a static manner. Okay? Here's San Francisco, and all the American cities, of course, had a very robust grid of streets. And that's in 1939. You can see here, most of it is low-rise. Even here, this is downtown, but even downtown is pretty low-rise. Then they built subway and this and that, and they increased the FAR. And San Francisco in 2004 looks like this. You can make out there are many more tall buildings. It's a city like this now. So ye hoga. This might happen even in Mumbai. just now with a gross FAR of 1.8, I'm sorry, I don't have a model of 2. Our 250 hectare area, when you compare to Manhattan, has 7.8. So we are way below. If Bombay thinks of itself as a world city, it's way below. Even if you increase that 1.8 to 4.2, it's way below Manhattan. Anyways, once a robust street network has been provided, infrastructure can always be added. And remember, infrastructure costs money. And as India becomes richer, we will be able to spend more money in infrastructure. Let's try to limit growth based on present income levels. Okay. Here's Hong Kong, glitzy city that looks like. Used to look like this in 1920s. Okay. That's what it looked like in the 80s. And they must have thought at that time that, my God, we have reached the end of growth. And that's what the same place looks like today. So they were continuously adding infrastructure. And that's what Indian planners need to know. We must have a liberal attitude towards floor space and understand that slowly, in tandem, one after the other, it never goes perfectly. And it would be silly to say, I want all the infrastructure that is here. It would have been silly to try and build it when you are here. So you have to understand it's going to be a messy process. It's going to be a bit out of step. You're going to go up and down, and that's what's happening in Mumbai already in any case. The tall buildings are coming up, infrastructure is being built up. City building is a messy process, driven by commercial interests, and to expect it to be anything different is illogical. So that's that. Well-designed streets integrated with mass transit. Okay. So yes, we have all this great infrastructure coming in. It's no use unless you integrate the streets and the mass transit. And we did a lot of work to see that this street. So just now, a lot of mass transit is coming up in Indian cities lawlessly and without any consideration of how it's going to fit in with the rest of the city, unfortunately. But that's the thing that Indian planning needs to learn. How to fit our metros better with our city. They're going to come up. How to fit our flyovers better with our cities, etc. So we've paid a lot of attention to that. We've also paid a lot of attention to where the stops will be, etc. Because all these infrastructure is already planned, and we had to think out how the Trans Harbour link terminates with this, etc. And the hierarchy of streets I told you, and what will the street design is also extremely important. All of us know that, and that's what we worked on. So we must integrate mass transit, and we must focus on street design. We have a very clear urban design plan, urban design vision in place. And what essentially we do, we look at Indian cities, there's huge amount of planning, but it's all two-dimensional, and you wonder what's coming out. What coming out looks like this. It's haphazard, disorderly. Now, the process has to be haphazard, incremental, messy, but the outcome doesn't have to be like that, is what I'm trying to say. The outcome has to be, finally, when it all comes together, it should make sense. It doesn't make sense in my view. So you get this sort of disparate sort of set of buildings, Gurgaon, Ahmedabad, Uncha, Nicha, Upar, all these sort of, that's our new urban landscape, and it needn't be like that if we paid some attention to urban form. So we have a form vision underpinning this plan, and it stitches together two types of urban typologies. It stitches together the low-rise, high-density fabric of places like downtown Lyon and Ballard Estate. There are great examples in the world, and we use those for inspiration and for fitting in here. So here you have Lyon. It's a terrific landscape. Urban designers will love it. All the private open spaces are well shaped. The streets are there. The buildings are all in tandem with one another. That's what you want to see come up eventually. And that's what the city looks like. These are the places we like to walk in. These are the places we consider beautiful. Shouldn't we be making cities like this? Okay. There's a place like that in Bombay called Ballard Estate. And Ballard Estate has exactly that sort of character. You have low rise, high density. Very little land wasted. You can see here, I just go back, well-shaped private spaces, well-defined margins, etc. Everything predefined. Each of these buildings is built by a different person at a different time, and yet it all adds up. That's the holy grail, right? That's what we want to achieve. Like this, or like that, or like that. All these arcades must have been thought out from the beginning. And we have stitched together also high-rise, high-density fabric of a place like Manhattan, which looks like this, and which has streets, which has lots of traffic, lots of pedestrians, traffic and pedestrians coming together. So we have taken these two fabrics and almost stitched them together. And you can see here, the high-rise fabric is in many of the plots here. All of these are high-rise. The low-rise is all these areas here at the back. Those are the low-rise ones. That's high-rise, low-rise, all making sense along together. And that's the vision I already showed you. But how does this come about? So this is what should come about. But if we wanted to do this, what would have to be to do? Okay? And we would need simple, clear, form-based building regulations. And that's what we have proposed here. So the haphazardness of our cities is an outcome of poorly conceived and text-based regulations. You know, you have these thick books of regulation that are produced, and architects have become like excise lawyers, right? You need to know all the complicated old-time excise law. You need to know all the complicated excise rules. Then you need to know what loopholes there are. Then you put all your creative energy into exploiting those loopholes. And that's what has become of architectural practice in lots of cities because of regulations like this. Actually, we need a sort of a GST reform of the bylaws. Excise ko leke, this pura book leke, throw it into the waste paper basket and start afresh and think of bylaws in a different way. And that's what we tried to do here and demonstrate that it can be done. Okay, you need to think of bylaws in a completely different way. So what would you do in that case? You would make form-based bylaws. So if you want to make coherent urban form, you have to use the sort of Ballard Estate type of rules, the kind of rules that this guy must have made at that time. You know, they made a model like this. Somebody must have fixed the height. Somebody must have fixed the building volumes. Somebody must have drawn up a drawing of this and then said, okay, everybody build according to it. And that's the kind of bylaws you need. You don't need bureaucratic text-based bylaws. What you need is drawing-based bylaws, okay, the kind that urban designers would make. Okay. And they made models like this, but we made simple, liberal, form-based bylaws for here. Now, to explain that in a nutshell, and I'm going to stop with this very, very quickly, is first we had our street network. I'm going to zoom in here, as you can see, and that's, you know, that's our blocks. 100 meters by 100 meters, and that's our street network, that's our green, as you can see. Now, these blocks, we were also going to break down into smaller plots because you can't sell a 100 meter by 100 meter piece of land. It's too expensive for builders to buy, so we thought we'd need to break them up. So we'd break them up into 3 parts or 4 parts. Sometimes we would get a foreign investor and maybe he would buy this whole thing. Okay. But so that was flexible. There was nothing fixed about that. We could break it up like this. Having cut it up into plots, we said this will be the margins that everybody would have to leave. Now we have met all the fire requirements and everything. It is not as if. The remaining portion is all coverage is allowed, entire. So if you took that 50 meters by 50 meters, okay, you let setbacks, let us say 6 meters on either side, you would still be able to get 44 by 44 coverage. Okay. So the guy who has bought his land, lot of full land is utilized for the building. All our 22% building coverage comes from that. Then we defined heights and the predefined envelope. This is the building envelope inside which any architect is allowed to work. Okay. And We had different varying heights we gave. Well, we gave varying heights so that, one reason was so that this building would get a few floors that had a sea view. So it was stepping down. So there was some reason like that. Well, not just arbitrary. There was a reason like that, saying these are the great views, so let everybody, all plot owners get some advantage. Then we said, inside this large building envelope, you can build a very big building, but this is the amount of floor space you can create. This is the FAR, this is the FSI. Okay, that's what's in here. You can see the development envelope is much bigger than the amount of floor space. So the architect can now shape the buildings. All the creativity of the architects now goes into shaping the buildings rather than in finding loopholes to exploit to be able to get extra FSI. FSI to fix ho gaya. And this volume is also fixed. Iske andar kaam karo. Now you can start building Kanchenjunga once again. We also said that you would have built 2 lines. Everybody would have to build a building there because we wanted that edge to be formed properly. We said you will need arcades here. They will all line up. Couple of rules like that. And of course, nobody is going to build buildings of this shape. You don't build a 100-meter by 100-meter or 50-meter by 50-meter building. You actually try to use the maximum height available because you want the views, and you build the podium lower level, which every architect will do his number, but we try to imagine what architects would do and just put together a speculative sort of a model. And of course, the skyline will be different from this. There will be no building like that China, Bank of China building that we have shown, but it'll all be of this sort. All our bylaws are a set of drawings which specify coverage and height, the development envelope, and a set of regulations which are essentially engineering standards. Height and bulk is defined through drawings. So this is a new regime, new way of writing bylaws that you need if architects are to be saved from being excise lawyers. And that's what the books look like. So we must adopt form-based building bylaws. That's the holy grail for improving the shape of our cities. Once again, let me remind you, I get the privilege of talking about this and leading a group of excellent colleagues. Some of the key ones are Nikki Shah, Ganesh, Tushar now, Jignesh, who is worked also on this plane, Shirley, Bindu, Kunal, Bobby, lots of people have worked on this. This is, I get the privilege of talking about this, but really this is collaborative work. Thank you very much. Taking too much time?
Can you please come? Bimal, you can also sit. Can you remove that projector? So, can I invite Mr. Phatak to respond and Nitin?
Good evening. I was in 2 minds whether I should tell some anecdotes about Mumbai's planning, etc., in relation to what Bimal presented, or make more theoretical comments about what the issues are. I think I would do the latter because the anecdotes will take much longer. So in the morning when the roundtable was inaugurated, Dr. Srivatsan made some comments in terms of architecture, urban design and planning. in terms of what are the domains of these and how do they react. Then in the previous discussion also there were some discussion about those things. Now I myself used to say that planning is not an extension of architecture. But now I'm today ready to change that view and say that architecture, urban design and planning can be considered as a continuum. And what really distinguishes between those three ways of looking at things is the knowledge about what you are planning or what you are designing. And that degree of knowledge changes. If you are doing an architectural design, you know many things in terms of what you are designing. Urban design, your knowledge reduces, and when you are doing a long-term city planning, it further reduces. And the problem, as Bimal was explaining, comes from the idea of imposing the architectural and engineering concepts on planning and that you know many things about the future don't, and therefore the problems arise. Second is time dimension. When you are doing architecture, the time is much shorter. When you are urban design, the kind of medium range. And when you are doing a much larger project, like the MbPT or what MMRDA did in BKC, they are much longer drawn developments. And therefore, it has also implication in terms of what you cannot do. Third dimension is span of control. How much control a designer or planner has. In architecture, the span of control is much higher, and as compared to planning, planning the amount of control starts reducing. And therefore, your planning, you have to, in terms of creating a framework, allows unfolding of future. That is what essentially here it is done, that you decide what is, as you called it, bare bone, but it allows future to unfold. Now, interestingly, some high tech has been, that's a of the trade. So you don't know what high tech is, but you are still using it. So it's a feel good kind of thing that this is. Like in BKC, we called it International Financial Center. So people used to ask, how can you ever think of international in Mumbai, the rest of the city? So I used to know that's an aspirational. And even today, nobody would call it international in that sense. Except for Citibank, there is nothing. That also, half of it has been sold to a Indian bank. Both to invest in development. What is landowner? You're planning like MbPT kind of know that the land is owned by one single, and that owner is control market in a your architectural design, you will pick up one plot from here and design a building. Much different in terms of case of urban planning at the city level, quite different because you are planning for a multiple landowners who are operating in a market. So it's not a single landowner for whom you are designing. Now these are, I think, distinguishing things. Now MbPT is interesting in the sense it kind of moves between the scale of urban design and urban planning. Because some dimensions are closer to urban design, some dimensions go closer to planning. Like deciding the street grid well in advance is an element of planning, but designing form-based codes is an element of some kind of urban design in terms of how things are. So I think there is a lesson here in terms of both the urban design as well as urban planning, that what do you do and what you don't do. And what part of this exercise in terms of port trust can be expanded to a city which has multiple land ownership and an active land market, will be a slightly different kind of proposition, and how do you manage those things will have to be seen in that perspective. Uh, Here, like in many parts of Mumbai, like Ballard Estate, Marine Drive, a lot of things were really governed through the lease covenants, because government was assigning those plots to people, apart from the general regulations as such. So that's an additional layer of regulations. If you are if you are the landowner and as well as the planning and development agency, so that distinction gets slightly diluted when you are dealing with a context of multiple land ownership and multiple kind of or the land market operating. Small point I'll make, particularly with respect to textile mills, and then stop and hand it over to Nitin, that the problem with textile mills in Mumbai was handled again through only textual regulations, and not looking at textile mills in the context of planning, and particularly street network. These mill lands were fairly large areas, and nothing was put in place because nobody looked at it in the context of the new demands on traffic, transportation, etc., etc. So today, Kamla Mills, which is a very large area, you can't traverse through that area, and the whole area is being redeveloped as if it's a one single ownership of land. That is again because of absence of looking in terms of planning. I think Mumbai's planning is reduced to not only regulations, but planning itself has been reduced to text, and that's what the problem is. I think I'll stop at that.
Okay, no, but a few points that he has made about, so you would take Nitin also. Okay.
Well, good presentation, though I saw this second time. But I am, last time when I saw it was on much larger scale. Now you have brought to some kind of focus. But today I will be rather talking like a Bombayite. So, first of all, how this will be, put into market? Is it something on the lines of BKC or something on the lines of mill lands or at Powai Hiranandani Gardens, which was meant for affordable housing, etc., etc. So in all the schemes, including SRA schemes, today it is virtually hijacked by private developers. So which way we can ensure that your form-based regulations or whatever, which has been well thought out, would be implemented? This is question number one, or rather, these are the issues. Another thing is, today in Bombay, 65% of population doesn't have a house. Forget about good house or a small house or a larger house. And there are, as per the last statistics, I think almost 2.5 lakhs of ready flats are available, unsold, in the city of Mumbai. So how do we sort of resolve these issues? These are very important issues. And perhaps, I don't know, there could be some slums even in these MbPT lines, if I recall. So how that could be sort of accommodated. And lastly, just last week, Iqbal Chahal, our BMC commissioner, unleashed Mumbai Climate Action Plan. Now that was really scary. It is scary because in a way I'm also affected. I stay very close to Chu side, where he showed a map of Mumbai, which exactly looks like what you showed in 1700. So these are, I think, we have been always ignoring these issues, but I think these are also issues. Forget about MbPT. Even if I have to make a small building very close to the waterfront or sea, what do we do? There is absolutely no answer. And when we have this kind of projections for 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years, nobody is, we are actually evading this issue. So how do we overcome this? Thanks.
So I don't know how to say this. It's our job collectively to not just make rhetorical questions, but to have solutions. It's become, we just make doomsday scenario. Say now, my God, we are doomed. What do you do with that? Doomsday scenarios are not at all uncommon. The time when railways were invented, it was thought to be a calamity that is going to destroy civilization. The times when aeroplanes were invented, when electricity was invented. Doomsday scenarios, if you just look back, I'd just say Google these days, you don't even need to look back, you just have to Google doomsday scenarios. You'll find doomsday scenarios going back 1,000 or 2,000 years. Now here we are, continuing to try and solve problems as we go along. Okay? When we were in college, the big doomsday scenario was India is running out of food. My God, what are we going to do? We are running out of food. We are running out of food. Everything seemed to cloud that. For you people, the fashionable thing is climate change. And if you did not take the food scarcity problem as seriously as you are required to take climate change today, you would be seen as a complete, horrible person. Food, we are going to run out of food. There was this club of Rome. We are going to run out of petrol. We are going to run out of plastic. You go back, you'll find a million doomsday scenarios. And here we are, India is food surplus country. Here we are, petrol we haven't run out of. I'm an optimistic person, not optimistic in a foolish sort of way. Optimistic in the sense that human history has been about this only, nothing else. About developing new knowledge to tackle the problems that come up. Not being daunted by the kind of doomsday scenarios that are played out, not getting emotional about it, and saying, yes, we'll solve them as we go along. And we have to tackle problems as they come. We can't solve all the world's problems at one go. We have to tackle them as we go along. Now, lots of people in Mumbai don't have houses. What's the solution? Well, build houses, man. There's no other solution to it. Unless you are suggesting that the people should leave and come to Ahmedabad or somewhere. Now, many planners, I don't take that as a joke, because many planners thought that was a perfectly reasonable solution. You know what they suggested? Bombay is getting congested. Too many people are coming to Bombay. So let us stop them coming. How do we stop them coming? Let's not allow floor space to be built. Let's not allow houses to be built. Let's create a scarcity. And people will not come. You know, this is disastrous. Because people will come in any case if there is a marginal improvement in their lives by coming to Bombay. To say that India has a population problem, so the solution is to have less food, this is akin to that. Bombay has a population problem, so let's decrease the amount of food they can have. Which is, they won't have floors. Aisa hota nahi hai. People will keep coming and they will make do with less and less and less. Per capita consumption levels will drop. The solution to problems, when you have a problem of scarcity, the only solution is to tackle the problem of scarcity and say we got to build more. If you have a problem of flooding, you got to find some engineering methods to solve that problem. And our job as professionals to come there and say, here's my solution. Here's not the raising the alarm. Raising the alarm is not the only thing we got to do. I'm raising the alarm about the disastrous conditions, the haphazard nature of our cities, or the lack of floor space, or the suboptimal use of land. I'm saying, here's the solution. I'll solve that problem for you. Okay? So we must commit ourselves to saying that we must state problems and we must state solutions. And doable solutions. Doable with the level of money we have. Doable with the amount of with the political scenario we are working in, etc. So my philosophy of design always has been, you know, you said you made these form-based bylaws, but they might, these builders, they will come and distort them. Right. That's a reasonable fear to have based on past experience. So why not make the bylaws such that the builders do not want to twist? Okay. Instead of creating scarcities and then forcing people to break the rule, why not get rid of those scarcities? So in general, I take a very different approach. I'll talk about a Bombay architect who once said this to me. Nobody less than Charles Correa. He said, listen, we are not social scientists. We are not activists who have to go and take our jolas and banners and go out there and make agitation. We are not social scientists that we have to go out there and analyze problems to death and keep documenting stuff to death. We are like lawyers or like engineers or like doctors. We have to give solutions. That's Charles Correa for you. We have to give solutions. Okay? We have to take a tackleable problem and solve it. And that's the approach I'm going for. So I do say that nobody knows the future. Perhaps the future holds the possibility of Bombay getting flooded. Well, we will have to build dikes. All of Amsterdam all of Holland is in a floodable situation. They have built dikes and they constantly pump water out. We'll have to do that. You might say Hong Kong or Amsterdam is rich. Well, we'll have to become rich. Is there another solution? Otherwise, all we are going to do is, oh my God, the sky is going to fall. We're going to have to build dikes. And at that point, no, Holland didn't. It built dikes as its problem. You get problems, you get solutions. You get problems, you get solutions. Solutions will create new problems. That, I'm afraid, is the human condition. To search for solution that will have no problems left afterwards is, I think, to search for heaven. Okay? So let's be realistic. Let's just say, yeah, like many people in, the whole world is functioning like that. The food problem of the world is solved like that. The energy problem of the world will get solved like that. There was a time when we believed that we are going to run out of petrol. Well, petrol is now stretched so far, meaning in the sense that with a liter of petrol, you do hell of a lot more than you could do at that time, and we have not run out of it. I'm not saying don't be worried about problem. Don't get me wrong. But be worried in a constructive fashion. Don't be worried in a alarmist fashion or an activist fashion. Okay? Be worried in a constructive fashion. I am afraid we are all, many of us have gone through, I presume, through architecture school. So we're not engineers. We can't solve engineering problems. We will have to solve urban design problems. We can't solve sort of medical problems or food growing problems. We have to solve planning, architecture, and urban design problems. But let's just go ahead and solve them. Let's keep the discussion to that. Instead of saying it's going to, sky is going to fall. I'm sorry if that sounded too harsh, but
It's not too harsh, but it doesn't. Well, what I'm saying is some kind of reality. You mentioned about food problem. So there are certain policies which was looking at this food problem, and I don't know much about this food policy, etc. But first step, second step, third steps were taken. Whereas now I'm talking only in the context of Bombay. They know that slums are the issues. So taking that as a excuse, they are having certain policies and certain way of dealing with things where there are more slums. In fact, Fatak sir, there was one Mr. Bijapurkar or someone who had written some document where they said that if there are no slums, then real estate will not survive. Because all policies right now is based on SRA, including Godrej and Shapurji Palanjis and all those big time, citizens, I would say, well-intended citizens. They are also into that trap. Now look at these mill owners also, which we talked about. Fine, they were inherit that property and they must get the larger, share in that. But eventually, there are only 5 or 6 developers, and they've exploited everything. Same thing in BKC also. It is almost similar thing. BKC, there are so many builders too, which are developing.
No, I didn't let him complete that.
What all I'm saying is that these are some of the issues these are some of the issues which we have been, in the name of solving, we are not solving it. That's what I'm trying to say. Or it is not really happening.
No, I think one has to look at that. Why has that problem come up? Now, overall, if you look at Indian situation, then in most cities, the slum population is about 30-35%. Why is it 55% in Mumbai? Mumbai is not poorer than rest of the cities. So there is something wrong in the regulatory system and the land market, the way in which it has been managed through regulatory framework. So look at that. Instead of doing, now what has happened in Mumbai is Mumbai has almost assured 70% of its population free houses. I mean, no city in a market economy has ever been able to do this. But a false promise has been held to these people. And naturally, in that context, you will get the developers getting stronger and becoming oligopolist in the market, because you have not allowed market to operate in a competitive fashion. So it's a question of looking at market and how you allow the market to operate in a competitive manner. The other thing in Mumbai is that the entire investment in metro is Mumbai centric, whereas investment in metro can be very strategically used to expand the supply of land. That how do you manage this? You have to effectively increase the supply of land. Now, unlike in Ahmedabad or Hyderabad, you cannot allow the expansion in a very sort of seamless manner. Mumbai is bound by water everywhere, so you need investment in public transport so that more land is created. That is the way to do that. Suppose the extension of suburban railway in New Bombay had not been done, what would have happened? Mumbai would have been even in a worse situation. So I think that is how the things have.
In fact, that is a good example which you have given of New Bombay. That was also never envisaged like that. But today, New Bombay is again taken over by real estate developers. That's a fact.
You know,
Yeah, you please. I think we'll get the conversation back into the proposal. So 2-3 points, which one was the way in which it will be put out for development was the opening question, and whether it will be taken over by one or two. So, and there's also a couple of questions in the net asking how it will be rolled out in terms of implement. So if you could respond to that.
yeah, I'll come back to that in a minute, but just let me answer once again your question. I think there are ways of talking about our problems that are constructive and useful, and ways of talking about our problems that eventually lead nowhere. Okay? As I said, to be alarmist about things and to say, oh my God, things are going to fall apart is emotionally satisfying, but ultimately unproductive. And so you must look at it in a more rational, straightforward way. But one big real problem is to complain about the nature of people, as if human beings have suddenly turned into something different, or as if we Indians are genetically different from other parts of the world where things work a little better. You see, there are developers in the United States, there are developers in England, there are developers in China also, and there are developers also in Norway and Sweden and Denmark, all those lovely places where everything happens well. There are developers everywhere in the world. Okay? But they all behave differently, given the context in which they operate. Okay? They are not by nature or by genetics rule breakers or monopolists or oligopolists. It's the context in which they operate is what allows them to operate in a certain way that is problematic for us. So we complain. What we have to do is to change the context in which they operate, and suddenly you get something different. Now that's easier said than done, but you have to start talking solutions. You can't say demonizing builders is the easiest tactic that is held in Indian arguments. You will blame the rich, you will blame the corrupt, you will blame the developers, and I get particularly miffed when the rich are demonized by people who are amongst the first 1% of India, which is CEPT professors. Okay? I mean, with the salary of a CEPT professor, you are amongst 1% of the Indians. So who are you to complain about the rich? I mean, 99% people are going to complain about you, man. So I think we have to abandon those ways of talking. We have to talk in ways that are constructive, and to say, listen, if people are like same everywhere, what do we have to do to change behavior? And what we have to do is to change the context in which they operate. Now, the context in which they operate is really the regulatory context. That is what Phatak Sahib is saying. They operate in response to the regulatory environment that we have built up. Architects, when they are faced with a set of bylaws that look like excise laws, will start behaving like excise lawyers used to. Let's find a loophole and let's exploit the loophole and let's make a living out of that. But as soon as you change the set of bylaws, as I believe they have been done in lots of places in India, the practice changes. It becomes cleaner, it it becomes simpler. So we have to start talking about how to change the context. For those of you who do not believe that people are the same everywhere, I mean, I come from a very large family. My father had 6 siblings and my mother had 9 siblings on that side. So I have 35 first cousins. Okay. And few of us are here and the rest are abroad in other contexts. We're all genetically more or less the same, but as soon as you take my naughty cousin and place him in New York, he behaves differently. It's a different context in which that person is operating. Same Indian, trained here like me, and trained here like me, another cousin who remained in India will behave differently. So we have to start talking about changing the regulatory environment, stop talking about things in an unproductive fashion. Having said that, I'll take up a couple of other things. Should I?
Yeah, I mean, the details of that, which was the question about how it will be rolled out. And
Well, it's a plan that requires lots of coordination between central government, state government. So when it will unfold, how it will unfold is a matter to be seen. It's simple. The land is just now, a lot of the land is leased to, as Patak Sahib said, it leased to people. As soon as the lease gets free, it can be sold to developers. Now, one reason for making this street grid was the grid is there. One pocket will suddenly become available. It will be sold to a developer, another developer, third developer, fourth developer, and developers will build. They will, I believe, the form-based bylaws are so simple that what can you do more in that? Well, increase the FSI, but the FSI has to be purchased. So nobody is getting FSI free. All the FSI on your plot is to be purchased. So if they say increase the FAR here, MbPT, and MbPT means we, Indians own that land. Okay? So we benefit. I'd be happy if the gross FAR goes up at some point. I have not a problem. And it will help solve Mumbai's problems, because if there's a scarcity of floor space, the increase of floor space is a solution to the problem. Okay, you can't bottle up a city and say, okay, I'm going to let it breathe. It doesn't work like that. You got to open it up.
there are a few questions online, but before that, I'll just take any. Mr. Das, can you speak in the mic?
In the division of plots, that you showed us, there were similar sizes. There were broadly two sizes. And you made a sketch of what possibly the volumetric restrictions or definitions of each plot would be for buildability, right? And you had a projected form which was uniform. And you made a statement that, well, nobody is mad to build it equally. There would emerge a form which would be unequal from low to high, etc. Now, my question is, yes, there should be a profiling. It would be just treacherous or murderous if every block just built itself from its periphery to the top uniformly. It would be a disaster. Certainly, you will agree to that. So how do we regulate two things? How do we regulate that variation of height, given the plot size being same and the FAR right of each individual plot owner being same?
First of all, let's start with what perhaps I have not communicated correctly. FAR of every plot owner will not be the same, right? Because the FAR is fixed.
So in the urban design planning, you are defining different.
You are defining the development envelope, the volume within which you can build.
In which you're doing the variation.
Yes.
But your projected envelope showed a block throughout.
Well, it was in some cases higher, some cases lower.
What? I missed that.
And you cannot go outside your envelope. The amount, so amount of floor space, so you got it.
The envelopes are ununiform.
They are not uniform.
They're not equal.
They are not equal. So even if every guide
Adding
is
up to a gross which is 5 or whatever.
gross, that is 2.
What is 2? One more point, no, that I've understood. Yeah, you buy a plot as per your requirement or affordability or whatever, and you therefore develop it ununiformly. The second thing is Mumbai FAR is no more 2 or 1.33. Mumbai FAR is 5. Almost entire Mumbai city is now under 33.5 regulation of the DCR. And that has 22 different clauses or variations for different situations of buildings, like cess buildings or town, whatever, cluster redevelopment. One second. My question,
Like-
let me
like
just
excise
complete my
laws.
question. Now, so the FSI is actually practically 5 now, no more 2. That's all I wanted to tell you.
so
It's uniformly 5.
and when I say 2, it is for the gross area. For the gross area, that including streets and parks. Okay. So when we had to decide, we said that how much floor space should be in 2.5 square kilometers of this MbPT land, as much as there is in 2.5 square kilometers elsewhere. That you've understood. Okay. So actually translates into something, 2 or something.
Any other questions from the audience? Is Ballard? Yeah.
Thank you, Bimal. I had a chance to work on something similar a couple of years back, and it was absolutely unnerving to work on something like this. And the way, in my mind, we had approached it was to work, okay, we're going to deliver a framework. Let's start with what we are sure about that we want to achieve. And then there is also the ambiguity, which we don't know yet, and we will plan for it. The way I see your presentation was also something for me similar, because you had certain things that you wanted in place, like the streets, the frontages, the build-up volumes. Sorry. So there are sureties, and then you left the ambiguities for the future because we don't know that yet. So in that sureties, was it like I know this is an architectural college and you discussed forms, and you didn't go too much into the open spaces and the green areas and the biodiversity and that sort of, was it just omitted for the presentation, or was it something that you want to address later?
This was a planning exercise. So we had to determine how much space would be left over for parks and gardens. Okay. So in the plan, we have shown this is going to be a park. We don't have to at this stage figure out what type of park that will be. That is a second stage problem. Whether it will be a football field type of park for playing, or it's a promenading park, or whether it's an amusement park or whatever. But that's going to remain accessible to the public. So we decided that and stayed within what we should be doing. Suppose they come back later and say, please design a park. Start behaving like an architect or a landscape architect, or collaborate with a landscape architect and start saying, okay, what's this park going to be? But as a planner, as an urban designer of this area, we said, yeah, let's have these tall buildings on either side, and let's have big long park, and let's leave all the seafront land as open as possible for public access. We don't want a wall to be created against the seafront. So we created an inverted U and created views for everybody, but without doing it. So it was, strictly speaking, a planning exercise, an urban design exercise. And I don't need to get into, let's put it that way, we were not paid to think about all of that.
Any other comments, questions? Please.
Maybe just to take Nitin's point forward. I'm a pessimist too, so don't get me wrong. With my pessimism, I also showed results of transformation and solutions. That's what I try and do. So just clarifying that in the beginning. Now, what happened was, why Nitin was saying that is a fear, which is not because of pessimism, because of a reality that comes about due to certain policy framework or nature of development. Cotton textile mills land development, we were concerned that the city got no benefit from it in terms of the requirements or the deficiencies of the city, whether it be the housing in the affordable category or the open spaces deficiency or the amenities deficiency. Now, these deficiencies of the city have to be addressed. The city will not exist otherwise. And I keep saying Mumbai is not an urban center, it is a non-urban center because majority people don't have access to safe drinking water or amenities or open space and so forth. So there's no urbanism. Now, therefore we need to address a problem of a city and not look at an island of development as an independent model in the satellite. I'm just taking that question further. And therefore, when any part of the city gets developed or redeveloped, some of these larger issues come in to influence that development. What I need to understand is, have any of those aspects influenced your planning proposal or urban design proposal at the BPT level?
Okay, so once again, I don't seem to have communicated well enough. We are primarily concerned about these larger issues. Okay, and particularly in the knowledge of the mill lands sort of face off between the city and the mill owners, which unfortunately the city lost. It lost, I think, it need not have lost if the problem were not posed as a zero-sum problem. When I say zero-sum problem, if we, instead of seeing this as the mill owner's gain is going to be the city's loss and the city's loss is going to be the mill owner. Of course it is. Of course it is, because yes, but agreed. I don't think the question or the demand is illegitimate. The demand is legitimate. Okay? Why can't both get what they want? The mill owners wanted to monetize their land completely. One second. So this exactly what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm saying. I don't seem to have communicated, but please listen to what I'm saying. It was believed that for the city to gain something, mill owners would have to lose some of their monetization rights. The sum of the land would go to the city and the mill owners would be left with less. How much addition? How much addition? How much addition? No, one second. No, that's not a detail. That's no, one second. That's not a detail. I'll tell you why it's not a detail. Because if you tell a person, Mr. Das, I need to get something for you, and I'm paying you the equivalent amount for it. Okay? Then Mr. Das will say, yes, sure. Let me consider that. You say, I want something from you, but I'm going to pay you only for half of it. Then Mr. Das is probably going to say, hold on, maybe you come tomorrow. I believe that these sort of face-offs in society between any two parties, let's not talk about mill owners, any XYZ. Always the problems in our society emerge because we expect to get something for less than its value. Now, there should be no reason for a rational person to say, I won't give you half the land provided I get all the FSI on my land. All the FSI of the remaining half I get on my land. Oh, sure, you can have that land. Allow me to build tall, allow me to build whatever, but all the FSI of the land that I lose will be given to me on my land. This is exactly how it operates when Ahmedabad widens streets or people widen streets. You take away a sliver of land and you say, ठीक है, compensation नहीं देता हूँ, but the FSI you can add to whatever is left behind. And it works. Everybody by and large says, okay, I've not lost anything. Now, when I see somebody not agreeing to a proposition, my first assumption is perhaps that proposition wasn't rational. Perhaps that proposition wasn't fair. So let's not get into the mill owner thing.
I would, sorry,
Let's not bring in other stuff.
okay.
Let's not bring in other stuff. The way this has been solved here is if Mumbai said, for example, that this land should not be monetized, rest of us Indians are going to say, why not? This belongs to central government. And if Mumbai says it should bring something to solve Mumbai's problems, why? Just because it happens to be in Mumbai? Rest of us Indians are going to say we want to monetize the full land. Now the designer's problem is going to be to get the rest of us Indians the full value of our land while solving your problem. That's what the MbPT plan does.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just going to intervene here in order to take a few more questions because we're dwelling a little. That's fine. Kaiwan, you have a point to make.
Thanks. Bimal, I just wanted to, you mentioned don't get into other stuff right now. And I was just thinking that in your position, you're dealing with a variety of intervention or urban design projects right now. So in a sense, you are also setting the tone for a certain way of approaching this situation, which has been messy. And I think in terms of what Nitin was saying or what PK Das was saying is, I think, just indicating that there is a certain kind of a messiness. And what one is interested in doing also, because you said that there is a certain kind of a paradigm that you are sort of proposing into looking at this. How does the planner, or is it in the capacity of the planner to deal with this other stuff and the messiness? Because whether it's land ownership, all of you all mentioned about writing the policy or drawing the policy, but in the case of the mill lands, we also know that it was the way that one-third got interpreted simply at a secretary level in that question. So there is that kind of politics. There is the question of land ownership that must be coming up in every project that you have dealt with. So you have a bank of experience from all these situations, or do you say that that is not something that you deal with? I just need to understand that as a query.
Let me put it this way. Yes, this is what is called politics normally. People write off saying that there is politics here and it's not getting sorted because of politics. What is politics? It's one set of people feeling unfairly treated, and other people saying, no, that's not fair, this is fair. 2 or 3 things emerge out of this. Any solution that has worked or works in a democracy is going to be one, by and large, which is fair on both sides. That's what I've learned. If you're asking me what I've learned from my experience, you cannot forcefully do things that are not reasonably fair in a democracy. China, you might be able to do, other places you might be able to do, use force to get certain things. You can't use force either ways. Okay. Now I remember since you raised that, I'd say, question of other projects, when we were doing the riverfront project, okay, and I think eventually it happened only because the solution was fair towards all the people who were affected by it. There's no force use. You didn't hear about it in the papers. It got done through, by and large. By and large, I mean, there's always some bit of friction here, there, but by and large, it happens. We built a ring road around Ahmedabad. You didn't hear about it. We appropriate vast amounts of land in Ahmedabad. You don't hear about it. I've learned one simple thing. Planning and urban design solutions that can be implemented are ones that are fair. By and large, I'm making a big generalization, but unless there's fairness on all. Now, when I say fairness, fairness on all sides. You can't expect that you go saying, oh, this poor man, everything has to be for the poor, then it won't work. Everything has to be for the rich, it won't work. Solutions that work across, those will work. So fairness is crucial. And the planner has all the reason to think of that, an urban designer. And indeed, I once again, please think about it. What this plan does is it says 70% of the land goes into the public realm. 70, not 1/3, 1/3, 70, more than 2/3 goes into the public realm. Okay. In the remaining, I still propose development so that the entire FSI of the 2.53 can be used. That FSI is the same as it would have been as if everybody. So what am I saying? I'm saying, listen, sure. Now, if you go to a developer and make a fair not a developer, but if any person, and you make a fair proposition, you have some chance of him agreeing to it. My first assumption when somebody says he's just simply not agreeing, my first assumption is perhaps it's not a fair proposition. It's not to imagine the man is evil. See, all our discussions where we brand some people as demons and others as saints are doomed to failure. Let's stop talking in that manner. Let's stop talking as if some set of people are always demons and the other set are virtuous. Oh, you can find demons everywhere, you find virtue everywhere. Okay? Let's start talking in very straightforward terms. It's a transaction. It's danda, it's business. Okay? So if somebody comes and says, this is my land, and he says, I'd like some of it for a park for Mumbai. Forget that. Let's move away from Mumbai and parks. Somebody says, Kaiwan, you Parsi, you have a very nice, lovely building in Mumbai. It's the heritage of Mumbai. You're not allowed to develop it. Kaiwan will say, yeah, my grandfather's house, just joking.
पूरा बम्बई तो बनाया अभी एक बिल्डिंग की क्या बात है
My grandfather's house, what's Bombay's claim on that heritage? You let me have all the money that my plot is worth. So Mumbai should buy his plot. If you buy his plot, then it's okay. But if you want to protect your heritage at his expense, it's never going to work. If you want something for Mumbai at the rest of India's expense, it's not going to work. If you want to get something for Mumbai at the expense of some mill owners. Now, let's not get that ownership issue just now because I'm assuming. If the ownership is false, then I agree. The whole question becomes different.
I have three questions which I'll take from online because we're running late. So I'll just put all of them together. Bimal, you could choose to answer. The first question is the height restrictions and the envelopes that you're enhancing here, would it have subsequent impact on the rest of the city, and would the city reconsider its existing regulation? So this project may have far more impact than what is limited to thing. That's one question. The second one is in terms of flexibility in future. So apart from road network, is there anything else? That's the second question. Probably want to take two, and I'll just take one more last.
So Phatak Sahib also mentioned, and I'd like to say that the philosophy underpinning this sort of planning, how would it apply to a brownfield site compared to or a multiple owner site? Compared to is something that we have done in another project. So that, and I believe some of the same principles can be used. I'm hoping that this plan has an impact on Mumbai and makes it rethink about some of how it does plan, how it does plan. But that's like a hope against hope, maybe. But I'd say be for the positive.
So flexibility other than,
Flexibility other than, I mean, the streets is fixed, the volumes are fixed. More or less everything else is open.
okay.
The parks are fixed. More or less everything else is open. It's a bare bones plan. I started. Uses are flexible. Uses are flexible. What type of park you want is flexible. What type of architecture is flexible. Everything is flexible. So it's a very liberal plan is what I'd say.
The last question here is implementation of regulations have always been a problem. So the hope here is that this regulation will also be implemented. So that you seem to rely only on its flexibility.
When policies don't get implemented, one reason for it could be that they are poorly framed. If this doesn't, then it's poorly framed and needs to be redone. I'm completely of the belief that things that solve problems get adopted. Okay? So the test of it finally is not in the purity of the design, but in its adoption because it solves problems, just in the way that it works in medicine or in any other discipline. Anyways, with that.
Yeah, there are a few more questions. Unfortunately, just running time. There are questions on what is the drainage plan, where is the parking, do you look at possibility of affordable housing here, and so on and so forth. So all valid questions, probably another time, another day. So before I wrap up, probably I'll ask Nitin and Mr. Phatak quick wrap up comments or responses.
It's coming
Yeah,
out
please into the-
particularly in terms of ownership and other things. I think we must all understand that property is still a right in India, a legal right, though it is no more a fundamental right. And if you are affecting somebody's right, it has to be a fair and equitable way of doing it. You cannot justify it on other grounds. That you want to do something else, you want to use it as garden or something. You can use it as garden, provided you pay the compensation for taking over the land. But there are ways of doing things. Now, since New York plan was mentioned, when New York put the street grid, what did they tell the people to build buildings? They said, okay, go ahead and build your building, but don't build anything in the road. And they didn't pay any compensation for that. On the contrary, when they constructed the streets, they asked for money from those building owners, saying that now you have benefited, you got a good street in that. But that's a different way of doing things, because you are benefiting and then you are asking for money. So again, it's one other way of being very fair. So I think this idea of being fair and just has to be there while you are dealing with anybody's right, and particularly of the property rights.
Nitin?
I think you got me slightly wrong. I'm not a pessimistic person. I'm very optimistic. Only thing is what we have been seeing and experiencing as Bombayite and as architects also, that every day this FSI is becoming a commodity, not a planning tool. And that is what is even, I don't know whether it is right or wrong, even under PMAY, the 4 verticals, the first vertical says increase FAR for monetization. So I don't know where we are going. So that is the only point. Otherwise, I hope that some of the liberal bylaws, which I also feel that there should not be any restriction on this FSI. I always say to some of my clients that we all are having mobile with 100 features, maybe having 120 features. We don't use all, but we have paid for that. So you use whatever is required. I think that is the underline.
Okay,
Thank you.
so much. It's been a very engaging conversation, presentation. Thank you so much for patiently being here from morning. Kindly come back tomorrow. We have another wonderful presentations in the morning. We have on waterfronts, one on Patna, another one on the Damanganga closer to this place. And in the afternoon, we have Tajganj and also the Bindi Bazaar, another Bombay project, which is equally engaging. And late in the evening, 6 o'clock, we have a roundtable which will focus on some of the issues we discussed about urban design as a discipline and practice. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow. Please do come. Thank you.